Okay, we're live.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call to order the building committee meeting of Thursday, September the 26th, and make sure we can have a meeting about it. Probably we are called to order. So Teresa, would you call the roll, please?
Trustee Whitehouse. Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Virgo.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Gray. Yeah.
I should say here. Yeah. We do. A quorum is present. Part of the agenda today will include a tour of our facilities here at the headquarters. So before that, though, I'd like to go ahead and approve the agenda and our minutes. So is there a motion to approve the agenda for this morning? So moved.
I move to approve the agenda. It's Michael.
Yes.
I second. This is Joycelyn.
Okay. Okay. It's been moved and seconded that the approval of our agenda, for the approval of our agenda. Any question? Discussion? Call the roll, please.
Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Virgo.
Aye.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next order of business will be the minutes of our last meeting, which was February the 22nd. The minutes of the February 22nd, 2024 meeting.
On April 24th is the last meeting.
Well, you know, that's really,
Those are the April minutes.
yeah, I've got that too. No, and it's not me, but the minutes do say 22nd February.
Wow. We can come back to those.
No, that's fine. I assume what's in front of us, but those.
One's on board.
Yeah, the board docs, I had that, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let me just rephrase that then. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was 30? So move. Yeah. Yes, April
25, I'm sorry.
25th, 2024.
Yeah, I move to approve those minutes. Michael?
This is Joycelyn. I second.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded that the minutes of our April 25th meeting be approved. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Virgo.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Yes, motion carries. The minutes have been approved. And now I think probably if our CEO will explain what we're going to do next, which will be the actually primary purpose of our meeting here is to discuss renovations for the headquarters building and what we're going to do initially today on a tour.
Sure. So, thank you, Trustee Johnson. The bulk of our meeting today will be an update on where we are with our feasibility study of our headquarters building. But to do that, we think it's important that it's context, so you can really see what life is like today. So we'll do a brief tour of headquarters with an emphasis on our dock-based functions, which are in the back, which demonstrates, I think, the need for modifications to our headquarters building. But we'll also see a few other spaces as well as we walk through. So that is what we intend to do. I think the tour itself will take maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll be back here for a more in-depth discussion about BNIM's work that they've done up until this point. So.
Are we, I know our members that are online are not, I assume not following us via camera. So will we set a time now that we would be back? I just want to because I want to make sure that our members online will be able to.
Yes, let's just say we'll be back 10:20. Is that seem all right? 10:20, 10:25.
Good. Yeah. Okay, we plan to resume the in-person meeting then somewhere between 10:20 and 10:25 for anyone that's online. And with that said, let's start the tour.
All right,
Aaron, could you mute the mic in the room, please?
yes.
Thank you. And Michael, if you could mute your mic on yours,
Yes.
then we'll resume. Thank you very much.
No. They're taking a tour through the headquarters building because we're getting ready to make some decisions of whether to spend money to redo the headquarters or,
Move it.
or yeah, move it.
Here's it in disrepair.
It's just old and tired, needs a lot of upgrades, but the upgrades are gonna be in the buku bucks. So hello?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Aaron, just remember to unmute the room when you're ready to start going again.
All right, the microphone is back on. Somebody have a phone on?
We in session.
Somebody's got a loop going somewhere.
That's Joyce's phone. It's probably Joyce's. I turned it on.
Wow.
Is it okay now?
No.
There you go. All right, it's okay now.
Well, it's an appropriate demonstration of what a feedback loop is.
How many people are online that's member of the committee?
Right, I believe.
We still have Michael. We still have Michael on.
So we do have a quorum to continue the meeting, and we have just included a tour, partial tour of this facility. So, did you want to?
Well, I was just gonna say, I always draw connections between unrelated things, but the concept of feedback is it feeds the previous frame into the present one and builds on it, builds on it, builds on it. And I would say the way our workplace is designed is that you could argue that we're stuck in a bit of a feedback loop, right? The building was designed for a certain model, I think, that is evolving or has evolved, and we've tried to make it work. But nonetheless, I think it gets in the way of creativity and contributes to this idea of feedback. So the same thing you got yesterday is what you would get today. Build on top of it. So with me today are these wonderful people from BNIM. We have Jeremy Cam. I always want to say Khan, but it's not. Yes, Janelle Rock, James Pfeiffer, and Craig Scranton. Yep. I always want to say Stanton, but either way, it's a beautiful name. But these four have been working with us, along with Ellis Katz, who's not with us today, to work with staff to come up with an idea of where we are and where we could go. And they're going to give you an overview and kind of update of where we are today and explain a little bit about what they can expect or what you can expect as a final product at the end of this work. So welcome you guys up, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm James Pfeiffer, and yeah, on behalf of the team, we're really honored to be with you and be your collaborator and partner on this journey with you. So to really explore what the future could be like for public libraries and your headquarters facility. So yeah, let's go ahead to the next slide, please. So we have been really inspired by your mission and your vision. And it really underpins everything that we do together. We start all of our sessions together with the mission and vision. Obviously, the mission is really important. It's about enriching the citizens and communities through expanding access to what we call the 4 I's, the innovation, information, ideas, and inspiration. And then the vision is really inspiring. You know, we were surprised to learn that it's not just about the best library experience in this city or this state. It's really about providing the best library experience in North America. So it's an ambitious vision, but it's one that you all really leaned into. So next slide. So the objectives of the work that we're going to be doing together and have been doing together with you now is listed here on the screen. So the project is going to envision the future of the headquarters and the operations by doing 6 things. So collaborating with MCPL staff to understand how the staff works on a daily basis and how they want to work in the future. We want to evaluate all of the assets and liabilities in the collections of buildings at this particular site. There are a number of buildings here that we've been looking at carefully. We want to consider a range of alternative space scenarios, including this building that we just toured, essentially some lease space as an option or constructed space. And so we're going to walk through some of those scenarios here in just a minute. We want to consider a range of alternative locations within the 3 counties, including this location and possibly elsewhere within the district. We want to understand the costs, both the short and long-term costs of each of these alternatives. And then finally, going back again to your mission and vision, we want to seek solutions in the end that really align with who you are and what you want to achieve. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of where we're at in this process. So we really kind of started more or less at the end of July, beginning of August. And so you can see where we're at on the screen with the arrow on the top. We are in what we're calling kind of a programming and scenario development phase of work for the project. We are maybe a little bit about halfway through, would you say? About halfway through the process. And ultimately, we'll be providing a final report, deliverable, and some recommendations toward the end of November of this year. And so you can kind of see what we've been doing. And we're going to walk through again some of the work that has been done to date that you see kind of in that bracketed section between August and say mid to late October here in just a second. Janelle, I think you're going to talk a little bit about it.
So maybe Brian, go back one slide if you would, for just thank you. Wanted to point out these orange boxes up here. These have been our meetings with the core team, and the core team is made up of kind of a cross section of individuals. There's about 10 of you all from different departments, different sort of aspects of how you view the workspace. And I think it's been a great group. They've been engaged. They've been great with feedback. They like each other, which is really important. It's been a very pleasurable experience for us. And I hope it's been fun for the core team. So with those 3 sessions that we've had, I, along with Amanda Worth Lorenzo, who's not here today, Jeremy and James have been leading those sessions. We just had our last core team meeting this past Monday. So and out of those, we've been able to tour some different workplaces, including United Way of Kansas City, Greater Kansas City, a nonprofit, a project that we just finished up not too long ago. We've toured American Century Investments down on the plaza, as well as the Johnson County Public Library Central Resources Facility. And each of those tours had a little bit different aspect of things that we kind of grabbed from those tours and said, we want to make that our own, or we would like to expand on those things. And we don't have a lot of images of those, but I think those were really important to sort of see the modern workplace in action and understand some of the concepts that we've been talking to with the core team. So next slide, please. So we started the process with the current program, and then developed office-based functions program and a dock-based functions. We've kind of taken this approach of, there are departments and processing needs that are very, very tied to the dock and need to stay with the dock. But then there's a headquarters kind of an administrative enabling functions component that doesn't necessarily need to be with the dock. So in the future, those two scenarios could be together, or they could be separate. And the benefit of having them, separate is that they could go anywhere and really provide maybe a little bit of boost to a community-facing component if it was positioned in a part of the city that was a little bit underserved right now. We're not quite there yet to say, this is the site you should choose, but we are in the programming process of kind of understanding the needs of those two functions, whether they're together in the future or whether they're separate. The next slide, please. And so what we found is that, whoa, okay. There we go. We made a little map there. So what we found is that the square footage required for the office space functions is around 31,000 square feet. Now, if we lease space, that's a little bit less, but that would be like if we were to build a new building or go into an existing building. That is the amount of square footage that we need for the office space functions. The required square footage for the dock-based functions is around 40,500. And so we're right around, 71,000 total gross square feet required. And a lot of that is, in additions to the dock-based functions that you saw today. This building right now is just at 51,000 gross square. So we have about a 20,000 square foot delta, if you will. Now, when we sharpen our pencils in the programming in future phases, that could shift a little bit. We've been a little more generous with our square footages right now just because of the stage that we're in. But it's not going, in our experience, it's not going to have a huge swing, of 10 to 15,000 square feet either way. Next slide. And so what we have, so what we have done is we've taken all those square footages and we've, sort of diagrammed them out in relationship to each other. This is taking a look at the dock-based functions and a planning strategy that could work. A lot of the feedback that we have received from the departments is not only, we just don't have enough space to do what we need to do, but there's an acoustic issue, there's a human health issue. There are several things that happen within the processing side, for instance, unpacking those large boxes that you saw. There's DVD and CD disc cleaning that has an off-gas component with the chemicals as well as a noise component that really kind of hinders human health. There are several, ADA and code violations that you saw today. But one of the things that we talked about a lot is the need for, heads down space in the open office area. And then, sort of coupled with this kind of high energy dock function that tends to be fairly loud. And one of the planning strategies that we talked about is a staging bar that could cut down on the idea of the sound transfer from these two places. It solves a number of functions. It gives the different departments an area to stage. All those carts that you saw in the middle of the walkways would have a place to live. We have also introduced the idea of this shared distributed support space, which are all of those things: small conference rooms, huddle rooms, enclaves, which are like little phone rooms, medium meeting rooms, large meeting rooms that would be distributed throughout and available either on a scheduled or unscheduled basis. Work cafe and kitchen. One of the requests was for a safe outdoor space here, to take your lunch and maybe be outside on those nice days. Additionally, vendor meeting area, and then the need for a mother's room and kind of a health room component. Next slide, please. And so this is the corresponding office space functions. Now these diagrams are kind of done in a vacuum, if you will. We don't have four walls or a space really to start to lay these things out in. But the idea here is very similar. The additions here would be an increase to the computer lab for marketing and organizational communications, space for virtual recording, which is becoming more popular. and also a space for commercial recording. The program includes a community-facing space that we have talked about a number of different types of functions. But that community-facing space, probably the most flexible idea would be to make it a community room that is open to the community, but can also serve as a boardroom. And go ahead.
Like a great example we saw was at United Way. So within their administrative offices, there's a large event space that also has staff kitchen connected to it. And that space can be reserved a handful of times a month for public events. But it also functions as their boardroom. So it would kind of two birds with one stone, that you could have it serve a number of purposes, like three right off the top of my head. And then it would be, I think it would change the dynamic of our headquarters building to have that public facing function.
And so these are some of the diagrams that we presented on Monday. I know Aaron's team is taking a look at the quantity. Does everybody here need these offices? I mean, I think there's a little bit of, massaging to do to, get that number exactly right. But our next step is really to take a look at this building and with a focus on dock-based functions. We're going to take a look at what that looks like for their new program, and then also what it could look like if everybody stayed here, and what are even if you gutted it, threw everything up in the air, stayed within the confines of this building, what does that mean? And I think in that scenario, we really just need to be proving out that still more square footage is going to be required in order to achieve the vision, in order to really bring new life to the facility. So, right? Yeah. I think that's my last one. Next slide, please.
Yes.
It is you.
Do we have any questions up to
Yes,
now?
questions?
Michael? Okay, thank you. Proceed, please.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Okay.
You're good? Oh, all right. While Janelle and Amanda's work has been going on with the working groups and the program, there have been a couple of other work streams that have taken place in parallel. One of them is to take a look at this existing building, at the warehouse, at the maintenance facility, and assess their physical characteristics, the roof, the walls, the floor, the accessibility, all of these things. We have done that. A draft report has been issued. It will be made final upon review and approval by the core team. And it's found a few basic things in the course of that research and assessment that, as Aaron explained to us, this is a 3-building building which has evolved over time. And it has evolved in a way and in a style that is not conducive to building systems. So you will find that some areas of this building are frigid, while others are very comfortably hot. So it's a matter of keeping pace. We saw, for example, at the emergency egress area on the south side of the building, a collection of residential style air conditioning units. Those are really not a way you would build a building new, but they're demonstrative of MCPL's attempts to adapt and use and try and find a way to make this building maintain its relevancy. And so the next is hats off to MCPL facilities. They're doing a really good job of keeping these buildings up, but age is catching. The organization of the interior spaces doesn't support the operations of Mid-Continent Public Library in the best possible way. And the physical environment, things like windows, human health, air quality, even noise, are deficient, or they could be improved, maybe as a positive way of saying it, to enhance the staff's well-being, to enhance their productivity. And then
knowing that these jobs are competitive, knowing that people who work here have the opportunity to work other places, how can the buildings be made to attract and retain the very best people? So next slide. All of those lists of outcomes from the facility conditions assessment, we started to ask the question, well, what do we do about that? What do we do about that? And this was an initial diagram, which we presented at the last board meeting, which breaks it down into a series of alternatives. Fundamentally, do you stay here and double down on these facilities, this location, or does MCPL's operations go somewhere else? And there are options or scenarios or hypotheticals that flow out of that basic decision in every which way. So going on to the next slide. We've identified a total of 8 scenarios out of the spectrum there on the previous slide to investigate further. So each of the scenarios makes some assumptions. And some of the assumptions are common to all. One of the common to all assumptions is that the Blue Springs warehouse is sold. That has a programmatic effect, needing to accommodate that square footage elsewhere in the centralized area, like Aaron said. It also has an economic effect in that it enables some money to be deployed potentially to this project. We're going to talk about the money in a little while. But at a high level, I want to make the statement that these costs that we're going to look at are all in costs. So they're not just about constructing the building, but there are all sorts of other things that have to be considered in each option, including moving, leasing, contingencies, escalation, when do you do the project, the cost of ownership, furnishings. These are each taken into account in numbers. We have, there's one option that you'll see that takes advantage of historic tax credits. And again, it's a hypothetical scenario. Any of the scenarios, in addition to that, may qualify for new markets tax credits based on location. The last statement is maybe the most important for what we're about to get into, and that's that we've worked with and collaborated with J.E. Dunn to create cost estimates for each of the scenarios. And surprisingly, even though each scenario looks really different from the next, the delta, the final bottom line between them is relatively small. Relatively, yeah, millions of dollars means something to me, but in terms of a capital project, relatively small. What that enables us to do, I think, is cost is a factor, is absolutely a factor, but it can maybe not be the only factor. If one project scenario is double the cost of the rest of them, well, that's maybe reason enough to take it off the table. If they're all kind of neck and neck, we can start talking about things like, well, what's best for the staff? What is best long-term for ownership of the facility, and qualitative things in addition to the bottom line. So it takes a little bit of the pressure, I think, off of those numbers. Yes.
Yeah, I just wondered if the cost with regard to the different options is the same, does that mean they have the same utility going out for each of the projects or for each of the options?
Utility, like
Service
services.
usefulness,
Oh,
sustainability, everything else like that.
not necessarily, no.
Okay.
Right. Like, when we look at these scenarios, there's like light and heavy renovation. Like, we know right now at this stage that a light renovation wouldn't get us to where we need to be in terms of programming this building.
Yeah,
But it's, yeah,
that's what I was thinking. If we have a certain cost to redo this building,
Yeah,
then we have to start dumping in maintenance and repairs and everything else like down the line. The initial cost might be the same, but
Yeah.
in terms of the life of it, we're probably going to have much more cost here than starting from scratch.
mhm,
and there's one other example that like, just 100% lease, like we go to a lease space. That's not a fixed cost that would increase over time, so you have to factor that in.
Sure.
And there's all sorts of costs associated with moving in and getting a place to perform the way you need it to perform. So, I mean, not to make up our mind now, but those two options right now seem like the least feasible for us. But I'll let you continue.
Oh, that's fine.
So, but yes, in terms of cost too, and this is Joycelyn, in terms of cost too, there are other costs that are hard to calculate, like the lost productivity using our current model. The cost, the health cost of working in such close cramped quarters, especially, we've learned with COVID and that can disrupt productivity. The inefficiencies that are in place because it has evolved to make do. And also the disruption of services if we do a renovation versus a new build. Those are all costs that are hard to calculate, but they're all in there and will eventually have a dollar amount at some point.
May I add one more to that
Yes.
list is the cost and creativity and innovation. So if you envision what life is like or feels like when you walk into a Green Hills or a Colburn, it's active, there's this buzz, you see people talking and exchanging ideas. And as we walked through this building, this is we're fully staffed today. You know, people are all hard at work, but how many people did you see? And what did you hear when you were walking through the building? Now IT is kind of dense and right, it's kind of fun, but maybe a little too dense. But nonetheless, I think, you know, to continue to innovate, you want an environment where you see people interacting with each other and exchanging ideas.
Yeah, it's also thinking about, you know, attracting and retaining younger qualified people if the setting is really
For sure.
very, very gloomy.
It's true. It's true.
Particularly this generation, Gen Z, I mean, bottom line is really like what they're making every year, it's really not what is motivating that generation quite as much. It's the day, you know, what am I doing day to day? Who am I working with? What kind of environment I am in? All of it, you know.
We do have some research articles that we could share on productivity in different types of spaces. And we can put that in our account. We have not done that today, but we can. You know, it's like 2.5% or 3%. It's fairly conservative numbers. But if you put that times your employee costs, it actually adds up quite a bit. So we can think about that.
You mean it bothered you that the shower curtains were the entry point to a cubicle?
Yeah.
Yes.
It
should.
Yeah.
Right, well, on to the next slide. I think the next slide starts to dive in, and I have a little simple diagram that attempts to explain what the moves are for each of these options. There are 8 in total. I'll try and go through them relatively quickly. So option 1, the light touch renovation or the light renovation, as Aaron just said, there's a threshold to even doing a project in terms of dollars. And this one meets that threshold and yet maybe doesn't get the job done because of a few things. Yeah, it has a low construction cost relatively, but office functions need to move out to a temporary space for 24 months while work takes place on this building. The work that takes place on this building is going to be messy because it'll be a little bit here, then a little bit there, and the processing or dock-based functions will need to kind of dance around that work. They'll be essentially living on a construction site for a couple of years. Then the office functions need to move back. So that's another move, another gap in productivity and service. And at the end of the day, what have you really done? Have you made the experience substantially better? And this option, not necessarily. This option is concerned with some of the basic things. Some limited HVAC interventions, some lighting, some finishes, things like that. But it's useful, I think, for comparison with the other options, if for no other reason. So the next slide contemplates a heavy renovation. So we're staying in this building and this collection of buildings. And we're saying, you know what, the contractor will be more efficient if everybody just moves out for a while and then moves back in when they're done. So again, we're saying it's about 24 months that we would need to have temporary locations for each of the functions of this headquarters building. And then everybody moves back when the building is completely renovated, that is. Now, Janelle had spoken to a slide earlier that had three big numbers on it. The bottom line number represented an increase of about 20,000 square feet from the current available square footage in this building. So that means a building addition of some kind. Some locations in the diagram indicates that here as well. To meet the program, that addition will need to be built at the same time this building is renovated. Go to the next slide. This one looks kind of like option number one, but you have to imagine that this is a heavier renovation. So office moves out, they move out for 24 months. This building is renovated, but it's kind of gutted. It would need to be gutted in pieces and parts to maintain credible operations of the dock-based functions. But that's the idea. You would, for example, demount, divest this building of its HVAC system and put in something brand new that meets its current needs and future needs, that kind of level of disruption. So that's disruptive. Two moves once again, but at the end of the day, you're getting better. You do have a building that has a new addition, and the systems and the sort of fundamental deficiencies of this building have been corrected in that case. So the next slide. This is an interesting one. So everybody moves away, for 30 months, a year and a half. We level this building and the warehouse and the maintenance building and kind of start over, thinking that it would take about a couple of years, let's say, to build a new headquarters on this site. You are able to kind of chart your own path and customize it to what it wants to be. At the same time, on the other hand, you're doubling down on this location. And is that the right move? Maybe, maybe not. It does carry with it, in terms of construction cost, the most expense. In part because there's a demolition cost in addition to a building new cost. So on to the next one. Here is a little bit different. So this scenario contemplates the office moving and staying moved. They move to a new place, somewhere else, somewhere that's not here. And the square footage deficiency that Janelle was mentioning for the dock-based functions is made up within this building. With the office no longer here, they're able to expand and fill the entire 51,000 square footprint, but not quite. Here we have almost the opposite problem, where all the dock-based functions really need is 40-ish, 40 and change. So there's maybe 10,000 square feet of surplus now in this building. It carries with it some potential. It could be something. But for right now and for the purposes of cost, we're just essentially thinking of that leftover space as a shell. So it's got walls, it's got air conditioning, things like that, but it's not actually built out for heat use.
And given the scenario, we'd also have some just general maintenance and corrections that would need to be happening even with this.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Heavy renovation.
Yeah. So, and that's a really good point. Because in this scenario and a few of them that follow, those dock-based functions will need to live with that for a while and remain in place. So next up is similar scenario, and this was the other one that Aaron had referenced earlier as maybe a strong and kind of a scenario where you sign a lease for the office space. They move out, they lease for 10 years or 20 years, 40 years, however long. Now, in terms of first cost, that's pretty cheap way to go. You do have to pay for a renovation of the existing headquarters complex, but it doesn't have a whole lot of upfront costs to rent. The problem is that you, as I say here, leasing is an expense that has no end. And that's really true. So what are you building value that way? Maybe not. On to the next is again a similar looking option here. We're talking about finding the right historic building, the office components to move into. There's no guarantee that we would find such a building, but in this hypothetical scenario, we say we find an old church or an old bank or something that has historic character that is maybe located in an active area of town that is potentially even walkable to various amenities. And that's where the office goes after a renovation of that building. A purchase first and then a renovation of that building. Yeah.
Well, what's striking about that right away, aren't there usually a lot of strings attached to historic buildings?
Yes.
In our Whitney branch, but there's a beautiful, beautiful home, except because it is historical building, we can't have bathrooms in it. So if we have a large building, don't we have inherently a great deal of limitations, for example, like no elevators, no bathrooms, stuff like that?
I would say the answer, it depends. It depends on the character defining features of that building. So with any building, historic building purchase, as part of the due diligence, there would be a historic structures report written. I used to be a preservation architect, so in the mind frame, that sort of thing. So it would go through the entire building and say, what's a character defining feature? So what about it makes it a historically significant building? What is a contributing feature? Maybe you want to leave those things alone, but there's some flexibility. And what is a non-contributing feature, which can be changed? Typically, that progression goes from outside to inside. But what you see from the outside can be a sort of a space.
I was just gonna add to that, for, yeah, also whether it's in an historic district and the impact to the community, you know, the surrounding properties, does it contribute, for example, you could do this with, say, a property in the National Landmark District for the Truman Home without great fuss, because you literally preserve non-functioning electrical wires in order to put, well, for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
The wires are there because it's the character of the neighborhood that contributes to district. Yeah. So it's a huge dependence feature.
Yeah.
That's why not every historic building would be the right one, even if it's the right size. Some would be very expensive to have to rehabilitate. Some might be less so. What's interesting about historic buildings is any building that's over 50 years old is National Register eligible. And 50 years isn't as long ago as it used to be. 50 years ago, we're starting to get into things that are in. So anyway,
Tributes to,
that in summary is that option. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's a really clean option. This clean option is MCPL stays here, operates here, while a new building in a new location is being constructed. On moving day, everybody moves to the new location. And that's it. This land and these buildings, these assets could be sold off then at that point. But it's, so what that gives the library is the space that best meets their needs, is most healthy, is best performing, most functional, more inviting. The construction schedule is efficient because the building can be built while work continues here. And the disruption to employees is relatively minor. Now, the drawback, big one, is that you need to find a property that works. It could be that MCPL already owns that property. There's extra space at one of the branch libraries in terms of land around it potentially, that would work, which would shorten the timeline that would be necessary for acquiring a completely new property, which could take a year.
So we provided BNIM with a list of possible sites that we own that we could build on. There's not many. There are other sites with land that's adjacent, like Raytown that has the green space next to the branch, and other locations, but we haven't even gone a step further to see if any of those pieces of land are available and given any thought, just all based on what we have laid out here.
This is an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyway. Of course, this property would be sold. Any idea of what might be realized from such a sale?
Well, I used to know the answer.
This is an
but I
unfair
don't.
question, so that's okay.
We may have it in the option.
The Blue Hills, I'll say what I know. The Blue Hills property has a value, we have in the calculations of about $1.4 million. And that's based on the most recent assessment of that property. So it's something to go on. I would imagine this complex would be worth more than that, but how much more, I'm not sure.
And then there's a time period to sell it. It may take a while to sell the property as well, you know.
Just to, he's referencing Blue Springs, not Blue Hills.
Blue
Blue
Springs.
Springs
What is Blue Hills?
in Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of District, probably.
Exactly.
Blue Hills, Blue Hills is a bank that I'm working on.
Another, and another less realized cost of a new location. This location is pretty centrally located. Moving it may impact our distribution and the cost of distribution and cost of travel. So there's that.
Yeah, with this one, you would have to make a strong case for like a gained efficiency from
Right.
moving. And based on what you just said, it's hard to see it, but you know, barring some sweetheart deal where we're like, hey, we got this great piece of property that we're gonna give you for nothing. You know, you really would need to think long and hard about it, but Jeremy's absolutely right. It's the easiest, right? Because it doesn't require us to uproot ourselves. But nonetheless, what we want to do here is present every possible scenario. Just so you all know that we're taking this objective look at what our options are.
And I'm not against the new location, I'm just saying that's a cost that we'll need to, or a logistical matter that would need to be in the figures. I mean, it may, as you were saying, it may be a positive impact. It may
Maybe,
be
yep.
a negative impact, but it just needs to be looked at.
Well, let's go on to the next slide. Here, as you can see, are all of them together. I think this demonstrates just that we are looking at a lot of options. They have some shared characteristics and some of them are quite different than others. But we think in these 8 are represented a pretty good range of things MCPL can consider if they're included. The next slide starts to get into the numbers. And I'd like to go to the next slide after this and then come back. So each of these bar graphs has 3 basic buckets of costs, each of which is broken down into sub buckets. But there are construction costs, those are the biggest. There are moving and leasing costs, they're at the top. And then each of them has some amount of credit back due to a land sale, due to tax credits, or some other thing that generates money for MCPL as part of this project. So back to the previous. I had said at the beginning that they're all relatively in the same ballpark. And again, I think what I meant by that is there's not a one that's double the cost of the rest. They are all kind of in that 30 to 40-ish $1 million range, all in. The couple that I'll point out, they all look fairly similar. The couple that I'll point out are the F new lease office. That blue block represents 10 years of leasing. And so you can see that that's quite a significant expense. It starts to compete with the cost of construction packages. And item G there, historic building renovation, has a bigger green bar below the line, and that represents those historic tax credits, which would be hypothetically a part of that scenario. So we can go on to the next, and I think this is maybe where I do, after this one, a warm handoff to Craig. Because we've represented the numbers themselves in several different ways. One of which is this net present value bar graph, and then we'll get into some more spreadsheety type things after that. Yeah. Okay.
We're ready to do it now?
I think so.
Turn over to the question. Any committee members have a comment, question? Okay, we're ready for you.
Okay. And really, Jeremy's done a great job. Pretty much explaining through the overall scenarios and the dollar values. The next slide. And this is kind of a summarized the different costs that Jeremy was showing in the spreadsheet, basically construction costs, which includes a number of different items within that construction cost. We'll look at that here in just a minute. Moving and leasing, again, move in and move out, that's actually the cost to lease the location, to move, to do a little TI renovation because to make a few changes, you know, et cetera. And then there's a kind of total project cost. And then, you know, what we kind of heard in terms of financing is that, you know, there's maybe a $30 million-ish number out there, $10 million of equity and $20 million for bonds, maybe as a way to, sell some bonds. So we did do some financing numbers there as well and talk about year one. And then we also talked about 30-year net present value numbers, which includes everything, but does not include the operational side. You know, if you got savings on living books here or there, it does not include any of that stuff yet. Or what you also said was about productivity. And we could add that based on some of our research. Thank you guys are interested in that. And then we always, because we like to advocate for resilience and long-term value. You know, if you were to make it to a net zero building, basically just add solar to your building. What does that mean? And typically in all these cases, it just means over 30 years, it's less cost. All right, let's go to the next slide. So glad to go through any of the numbers. It's been a minute since I've done the calculations, but there's kind of a core shell space number on each one of the line items. We worked with Jay Dunn, who graciously provided some free kind of upfront estimating for us, knows the building. So kind of gave some ranges in which to put in. And I've always gone to the highest part of that range, just to be honest with you, to make sure we were covered in that piece. TI office, that's actually building out the interior side of the office component. So when you see that number, that's what that is. TI dock and base functions, again, as we separate that out, that's building out the interiors. FF&E, which is furniture, or primarily within the space. So we put some numbers there for that to get some new furniture. Technology costs, there's always technology costs, new Wi-Fi systems, cabling, all those components. Soft costs, which is we put in 20%, right? Getting the 2 or 25%. Which includes both, not just design costs, but all the entire set of soft costs, property management costs, special inspections, et cetera. There's lots of things that fall into that bucket. Lawyers fall into that bucket. Need that along the way. Escalation, we included escalation to midpoint of construction, which is pretty standard for the industry because escalation today is a real thing. Or has been a real thing. Hopefully it's stopped as much as it's been going up, but we included that. And then we included contingency. So we need a contingency for a project like this. Make sure it all falls within the bucket. Then the moving lease cost, there's a lease cost there. I went out and looked at some different options, in the market, showing what they were gonna go for. So we still have to negotiate a fairly short-term leases for those move in, move out. We haven't made any phone calls or done anything like that, so these are just general numbers that are moving costs are based on cost per square foot. Without costs, again, some costs there for, making a few modifications to a lease space. Maybe you need a big conference room, maybe you need this or that, right? Not like we're gonna go in and completely redo space. Let's see, and then there's some buy sell property. The blue screens, put in 1.4 as a fairly conservative number. That's what it's appraised at currently. So the number there. I think I put $30 a square foot on this existing building as a sell cost. On the last one. And then the historic tax credits on the historic building. I'm again doing the side level. We added some more costs per square foot for the building because typically those do cost more for renovation, but you get in this case 45% back. We also added in, again, not to get too technical, but to do the federal tax credit piece, you actually have to create a for-profit entity to get the tax credit. So I actually have included taxes and on this one because you have to create a for-profit entity. We do this with not-for-profits all the time, but that is the one piece you have to be careful of. Sure you understand that you will be paying some taxes, at least over the first 5 to 7 years. So, and then down below are the various numbers on equity and financing and year one costs. They get fairly similar in nature. And of course, I think what Jeremy said was number D is fairly expensive. I would say that there's still value here in the frame of this building, right? But to go offsite and then come back and reconfigure that project. Okay, in general, that's a quick overview. I'm glad to go into any depth of numbers you want to go into. But I think here we just want to simply show you that, we've done, I think, a fairly good job of capturing all the potential costs, right, for a project. It's not just construction costs. It's not just design fees, things like that. It's a full look at what development costs would be for the project.
I really appreciate this detailed look.
Yeah.
Historically, this board hasn't really leaned towards leasing. Right now, we only lease one space, and that's our Red Ridge space. We did it temporarily for Green Valley. And the main reason for that is, and my concern is you're going to be, if you do a permanent lease, you're leasing for your core functions. And that's a concern of mine, because suppose the owner sells and you have to move, then you're moving your core functions. So that would be a main concern of mine about the leasing option.
I share that concern. The idea here, I didn't want to get too granular, but I think I've talked to some of my colleagues across the country who built new headquarters. And maybe like our messaging focuses solely on construction costs without thinking about what the total project cost would be. And so I thought it was best that we just start with just this really like comprehensive look at what the cost would be in addition to construction. And this is the range that we came up with. And as everyone said here, it could shift slightly, but I think these are pretty solid numbers as to where we would be. So great work.
Ron, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I understand in the scenario H, we're gonna have a brand new everything, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, complete new headquarters. Exactly.
Okay, and then one I find real compelling is proposition E,
E.
where we basically just get a new
Yeah.
headquarters function, okay? So I've noticed the cost, they seem quite similar, $33 million for a brand new everything. And in Proposition E, just get a brand new headquarters. So
Yeah,
why are they so similar? Why is not E?
well, I think, we have some credits there on H. We have $2.6 million of credits versus, kind of 1.4 million on E. So there's a little bit difference there.
Okay, but in Proposition H, we're also going to be building 40,000 square feet for the docking and all that stuff. So
Right.
I just thought there'd be tremendously more cost
Yeah,
for that.
it's true, but we also have a pretty good number in there, for the renovation of this building.
So this would take a bunch of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, there's still a fair amount of money associated with this building. We put in heavy renovation. I want to make sure that's
Okay.
clear. We put in heavy renovation for this building, plus for the 40,000 square feet, plus we put in, core shell for the 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
So that you actually have functioning space whenever you want to actually occupy it for something.
And if it's 40, they expand it to the 51.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. So, yeah, it's got 51,000 square feet still associated with it, on this side. So in warehouse buildings, we have warehouse buildings are typically more economical than the office space in general, but still have a fair amount of money here on the side. So,
We did kind of a combination though for the interior fit out here, because we have both office and
yeah,
It's not
That's right.
purely, it's not home.
it's not an open, it's not an open warehouse building, but it's,
Sure. Okay.
a good question.
And I think one of the clarifications that we all worked through on the heavy renovation here wouldn't include, for instance, ripping off all the skin and putting it, putting a bunch of glazing on the exterior, because this building is so deep. Even if you added a lot of glazing, you're not going to get a lot of light very, very far into the building. What we were relying on was more of an idea of lighting from above.
And all new mechanical systems, all new,
Right.
the heavy renovation does have some real work here. And that's, want to make sure that's clear as well. I mean, we may add more glazing and locations, et cetera, but it's not reskinning the entire building.
And does that scenario E also include maybe being able to offload our storage facility like in Springs or other stores?
Yeah, the 1.4 million is what we have in there for that,
Okay,
that cell. Is that a right or wrong assumption? You guys tell us, but that's what we have.
Yeah, it's just important to remind everyone that was purchased as a stopgap measure that would be liquidated at the end of the capital campaign. So we've been doing an audit of what's in that building and we're thinking about what needs to stay and what can go. And there has been some interest in purchasing that property.
Where is it located?
Blue Springs, right by Blue Springs North.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like literally right around the corner.
Gotcha.
If you'd like to see it, I'd be happy to give you a tour. No, right.
On this site, including across 24 highway, what's the total size of the site? I'm gonna get to, what is undeveloped? This site.
On this parcel right here.
He's
Was I-
referring to the one across the street.
Yeah, where I'm pointing to. Yeah,
Across
that's
the
right,
street.
That's right.
Yeah. Jeremy, you got that square footage?
Not in my head, I would need to look it up. I think it's 3 acres or less across the street there. And
So how much of this entire ownership is undeveloped?
of the property that MCPL owns here is, let's call it 2 acres, just to be conservative, across the street. And then probably an additional acre at the northern end of this property.
Then if, with 2 acres. Because, I don't know where I am in this building, so across 24 highway. I'm sure we'd have to do something about the ability to cross the highway.
Across the highway is not MCPL land.
Across the side street.
Across the side.
Across,
Side
You
street.
said, you told me the other day, wait, it's across the highway we hit.
Oh, no.
I saw the one we saw
I
today.
apologize. Yeah, no, it's
So that's 2 acres.
right.
I remember when we purchased that.
Okay. And does it slope quite a bit to where we came out of this building?
South and north.
Okay, so I know that where we are. Yeah, you told me across the street. I was like, how am I gonna cross this highway all the time?
Are you thinking about the office component, maybe just?
Well, that's a possibility, and then I think there was a mention of additional requirement. What, 10,000 feet more of
Yeah, so.
space, so I don't know what, I mean, could be anywhere on the campus, but
Ideally, I think it'd be continuous with the building, unless it's a separate function. Which, I don't know.
It could be in addition to this.
Yeah.
To this one.
Yeah.
This.
I just didn't know how much was available for
Yeah.
for future development.
After this meeting, I'll confirm those numbers.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah.
Or on scenarios? Just
How far is it, do you think, along 24? I'm just trying to figure out or you can send me dimensions later, that's fine, that's good. We have anything else from the committee? Yes.
Is there any preferences or non-preferences, those that you want to throw away?
Non-preferences is A and Lisa.
I was just envisioning, I understand. On this large stone building over here, plus another, which is used for storage, I understand, plus a building over here, which is also used for storage. If they could be consolidated to where we are sitting right now, would it be realistic in terms of parking and everything else to actually use the spaces here to the north? And again, on open, unfair question.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. That is a good question. We should look at that.
A quick question for our attorney real quick.
I think it
If
is.
you're picking your brain, you don't have anything in the recesses of your brain in terms of historic significance of the stone house.
That stone house out here,
Yeah,
I don't know,
I don't think
I
so
don't know what
either. I
exists.
just know every now and then we'll get a developer runs into a hiccup like, oh, we didn't know that was on the city's list of historic properties.
I can look into that and see if it is.
I would just make sure that that's something to cross off.
Happy to do.
Make sure that's not a bump.
Third party that is there, is that?
Yeah, so in our conversations, we've talked about whether or not they stay there, or if we kind of bring them into the fold and that function be a part of our normal headquarters. It's for staff and the deliveries, they don't need a delivery dock, so to speak. It's a relatively small staff is what I'm trying to say. So if need be, if you were to decide, well, maybe that building goes away, it would be easy to incorporate them into this building.
Answer partially the question about the shed space and the warehouse space. So particularly the warehouse, that's a pretty high bay type of space. They have furniture, a lot of sort of floor to ceiling big stuff. I think it would be kind of difficult to transfer all that here, including the shed. The shed is mainly materials for all the branch libraries. And as Jeremy mentioned, the facility staff has done a great job on this building. They do a great job on the branch buildings, keeping those up to date. They have materials for all of the branches. They kind of act as a contractor might, if you will, jack of all trades to go out and fix whatever needs to be fixed in those branches. And I think if we're if we're taking Wood Springs warehouse and transferring it here, I can't imagine that everything in the Wood Springs warehouse would have to go away. I mean, we're gonna need to find space. My gut feeling is it would be a tall order to absorb all of that into this.
I probably, historic renovations. I tend to think it's very expensive. I know it may look nice at the end, but I'm along with A being one that I really wouldn't want to consider. I would probably not be very giving much consideration for historic renovation. But the rest I want to review again, it's a lot of data.
And so, maybe you could share a little bit about what to expect when we, wrap up this process of planning, when you give a full presentation to the board after the first of the year.
Do you want to go to the next slide? So speaking to that point, wrapping is, as James said, yet this year, some of the deliverables we will provide include the programming report that Janelle has mentioned, a tabulation of the square footages that are needed and their characteristics. A facilities conditions assessment report, which talks about these buildings and their assets and liabilities. The scenario analysis that Craig just went through, including the financial models, hypothetical test fits. So imagine like a basic floor plan diagram for each option, illustrating what it would look like, and then construction costs as well. And the last one, importantly, recommendations to the board. We're not just wanting to present them with raw information, but rather give them our thoughts about the best direction to move forward. Did that get at the?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you come back and recommend option E, of course, are you are you also gonna be, giving recommendations on financing?
I think
Or is that another bunch of things to handle?
We'll have those recommendations. Jeremy's done some preliminary work on it, but he's been quite busy with
Sure.
year-end budgeting and all that. But we have some ideas, they're not fully fleshed out, but those will be presented to the board as well.
And would just remind to the board, as a long-standing board member here, as we look at these plans, please remember, we serve a library district that is larger than 3 states. We're circulating over 10 million items. We're doing countless amount of varied programming. And we serve 850,000 people in our districts, plus support other libraries in the state. And I would like to see us have, this is my opinion, I would like to see us have a headquarters that's suitable to do that, because that's a lot to put on our very relatively small staff in this area.
One more thing to add.
Option A.
One more thing, man.
There's 145 people here, full-time
Wow.
staff. And I just think that they're deserving of a modern workspace, of the sort that we've given to our public services staff in the branches. So one piece of interesting feedback we got from staff when we were doing these workshops was that it's easy for us to go out to branches and spend the rest of the day. But when branch staff come here for a specific reason, they want to take care of their business and get out of here as quickly as possible. But there's a cost to that, right? That we're not able to collaborate with people from other locations. And we would like nothing more for them to come and spend time at headquarters. So there's a lot of ideas and that could be shared in that scenario where it's a desirable place to work. So, yeah, you guys have done a great job.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's great.
and we're happy to share more information if need be. I think there's some things that we'll put together and email out to the board. If there's a need for an additional meeting or an update, we're happy to do it. But as it's planned right now, our next visit will be to the full board, and we'll talk about that at the end or beginning of the year. I forget exactly where it lands, but around then. All right.
Yes, I thought I had a question. I had mentioned earlier that the population center of the district should be included in, and that's our district over there. I'm not convinced that we have to move from this general area. So I would leave, whatever our plans are, I soon. I would say rehabilitate, I hate using that term, but yes, I want to do something with this site here. It's however many square feet, how can we hold another building, et cetera, and not cost 24 hours?
Bridges are expensive.
Well, yeah, and I thought. All right, so how about any other business?
Yeah, can I make a comment?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to applaud BNMI for this presentation. I mean, this is really good stuff. Very thorough. And me personally, every time I've ever walked into MCPL headquarters, it's almost like you don't even want to stay here, like Aaron was saying. It's like, and then walking down and trying to find something in this building, it's like going through a maze to me. And so I'm really excited about the future here, and I think we have an opportunity to really do something amazing for the employees. Just imagine, and I've tried to imagine myself coming to work in this building every day. And as Aaron said, people come here and we can't really we don't have a great meeting space. And so, yeah, this is great timing. It's time. I guess that's the last thing. It's time to do something. So I applaud your efforts, and man, let's get it done.
I think we concur. If there is no other business, is there a move to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting, and I'll just do this verbally. All those in favor say aye.
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 No. We have adjourned the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, guys.